Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jim Jones, and I have the pleasure of serving as Executive Chairman Emeritus of the Atlantic Council. It's a real privilege for me to provide the introduction to our session today, which is Completing Europe, Central Europe, the Three Seas Initiative, and the Future of the Transatlantic Relationship. As one who served in uniform during the Cold War, I am very familiar with the decades of struggle and sacrifice that the peoples of the then-occupied states of Central and Eastern Europe endured to regain their sovereignty, freedom, and their places within the Western community of democracies. This is a region that today includes some of America's staunchest and closest allies in an enlarged NATO alliance and a Europe whole and free. Much progress has been made to integrate Central and Eastern Europe into the economic and geopolitical frameworks of a wider Europe in the transatlantic community. However, much more needs to be done to finish the job, to consolidate these gains, and to ensure that our progress is never put at risk. This is as much an American interest as it is a European interest. It is with these thoughts in mind that I have the pleasure to introduce the President of Estonia, Her Excellency Kersti Kaljulaid, who will address the role of Central and Eastern Europe in the transatlantic relationship and the efforts she is leading to make this community stronger, more prosperous, and more capable. As the title of our event notes, one of those efforts is the Three Seas Initiative. Its objective is to accelerate the development of cross-border security, transportation, and digital infrastructure in the regions between the Baltic, Black, and Adriatic Seas, hence the name Three Seas. This is a geoeconomically and geopolitically ambitious undertaking of tremendous importance. And frankly, for me, it's a 21st century expression of the vitality and longevity of the transatlantic link. Have no doubt that its success will have strategic ramifications. It will sustain, if not accelerate, the region's remarkable economic growth. It will reinforce the region and indeed Europe's economic resilience, including its energy security, by diversifying the sources of supply. And it will deepen the economic integration of this region into a wider Europe. Last month, the Three Seas Initiative got a huge boost when U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that Washington is prepared to provide up to $1 billion for Three Seas Initiative energy projects. This kind of bold initiative portends a successful Three Seas Summit in Estonia this June, over which President Kaljulaid will preside. President Kaljulaid was elected as President of Estonia in 2016. She brings to that office a career in business, including as CEO and CFO of the Iru power plant in Estonia, and as a member of the European Court of Auditors. With her commitments to values, a flair for vision, and sound business pragmatism, the President stands among Europe's most dynamic leaders. One fun fact that you may not know about the President is that in 2018, on a visit to the U.S. as President of Estonia, she decided to take a closer look at the state of American infrastructure, our bridges and roads, by running the New York City Marathon. So perhaps on her next visit to Washington, she can time her stay to coincide with the October United States Marine Corps Marathon, which is my preferred long-distance run. Madam President, thank you for sharing your time with us and for visiting the Atlantic Council. Ladies and gentlemen, our agenda is simple and straightforward. I'll first turn the floor over to the President for her remarks. That will set the stage for a discussion she will have with Damon Wilson, the Council's Executive Vice President. Madam President, the floor is yours. Thank you.
In the spirit of Estonia, we've decided to go straight into a town hall format so we can have an engaging conversation with all of you today. Madam President, welcome to the Atlantic Council. General Jones, thank you for that introduction. I also just want to tip my hat, Ambassador Jonathan Vseviov and your extraordinary team that we've been able to work with here at the Council. Welcome. General Jones, she not only ran the New York Marathon, I think you ran to Mount Vernon this morning, if I'm not mistaken, to check out Washington's infrastructure. So you might have some advice for us. But let me just start with where General Jones left us. Three Seas Initiative. This is not a common household name. You're hosting this summit in Tallinn in the middle of June 16th, June 17th. Just What are the strategic headlines to understand? What is the 3Cs initiative and why is it important to you in the region?
I start from history. Countries who are involved in 3Cs, most of them, were behind the Iron Curtain for 50 years. And if you are behind the Iron Curtain, you later on evolve and find that compared to each and every other country in Europe, you are facing a huge investment gap. You are missing all the links, west, east, north, south, everything. For 30 years now, these countries have been working on their infrastructure. And west, east, I have to say, and mainly for the business reasons, is better developed. But this region has not been seen as a common market, common area, countries which, fit closely together, and therefore actually, as a most dynamic part of Europe, create a lot of opportunities which can be branded. These countries of the European Union, which belongs to 3Cs, they grow roughly at the rate of 3% a year, whereas the euro area does only 1.5. They represent 100 million hard-working people who are well educated, because one thing which joins these markets together is that the education is really good. People educated, hard-working, and also used to, work, I would say, without that much trade union support, like in some other countries, which doesn't mean that they are ready to be exploited. But there are less restrictions on the job market. This is more flexible. And as I said, there are 100 million people, but nobody has seen them as such. So 3Cs initiative brands these countries as a market. Yes, we speak different languages, but we're all part of the European Union. And the European Union, of course, is a single market, so cross-border operation is easy. How United States come into this game might be your next question. Fine, you are creating a forum to brand yourself as a dynamic part of Europe, easy to understand. It's easy to prove that there is an investment gap. In fact, IMF is analyzing it, and for smart connectivity, we in Estonia as well. But how does United States come into it? Well, United States has always been very important ally and partner for all these countries. These countries are indeed EU members, but they are also NATO partners and allies as well. These countries are situated in a geopolitically potentially seismic region. These countries face, of course, constantly threats, or on the other days, bribes from our big eastern neighbor to pry them away from our free world, get them closer to Russia. If you go closer to that country, then that means, you are starting to lose your independence, and losing your economic independence is always a risk. Yes, they are protected by the EU regulations and rules, but we know how capital, which is predatory, can have influence. And there is more predatory capital in the regions. There is of course, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is looking for investment conditions which are crippling to the further development of economy and can lead to glass ceilings to the local companies and local business developments. And that is why United States has been ready to partner with these countries from the beginning of the 3Cs initiative. President Trump, in his first year in office, actually participated in the meeting of 3Cs in Warsaw, and made it very clear that he's also, very supportive and ready to continue what has started already before his time in the office, to make sure that these countries have the full support of the United States in creating a region which is vibrant, quickly developing, and has access to capital. Now you may ask, this 3Cs initiative now is creating a fund. There was a wonderful promise of up to 1 billion by Secretary Pompeo in Munich Security Conference. Poland has put in $500 million. Other countries are coming in with smaller contributions. Private investment is invited into the fund. The gap will be about 500 billion in the region, the investment gap. And this fund, will look to be about 3 to 5 billion big. It will be open for 2-year period after Tallinn meeting for private investments. Are you getting anywhere with this? And our answer is that in addition of branding 3Cs countries as a market, in addition of supporting them in their ambition to develop and continue developing quick and cohering with the rest of the Europe, we are creating a model and proving the concept that under the free market conditions, because this fund is not giving away money, it's seeking return on investment. This fund will decide on the projects independently. There will be no political meddling. Yes, the investment area is defined: infrastructure, energy, smart technologies, smart connectivity. Short for me. I think this covers everything, because nowadays everywhere there is smart connectivity. But the politicians sit hands off and the fund does the work. So free market, private money, and it helps with the development. Sometimes people need a reminder that if we talk about development, it doesn't need the crowding out process by the public money or the private money. So this is the first bird to fly, we hope. Maybe others will follow. I'm very happy if there will be competing funds in the region. But it's just to prove the model, the proof of concept. And I feel in Tallinn, we will be able to prove that private capital, public capital is able to come together, accept this marketing concept of the 3Cs, accept that the region is potential, has good potential, demonstrate that, there is a lot of money in the world which is seeking to invest in relatively sure projects which still have some return. As we know, this is not at all easy nowadays. And by this, start proving this concept, which was dreamed up by United States, Poland, and Croatia 5 years ago. They invited all of us on board. We should never forget that. Thanks for President Duda, also thanks for President Grabar. They started it, and in Tallinn we are consolidating it into the fund, which will thereafter start investing. Thank you all. Thank you also for people from United States who have been believing into this initiative, been demanding that we get it concrete. Now we are getting it concrete.
Madam President, thank you for that. I think that's a very helpful opening to understand why is an infrastructure project that we're talking about so strategic and offers the opportunities of political effect. I want to, before I get into some of the issues and parse them on 3Cs, let me first just say for our audience, our online audience, to use the hashtag 3Cs to join the conversation, to chip into this as we'll continue this conversation all the way through to the summit in Tallinn, including on our social media channels. But let me come back to, it's pretty audacious. You are president of a country of just over 1 million people, and you're sitting here talking about how to catalyze private sector to fill a $500 billion infrastructure deficit in a way that is addressing a geopolitical seismic challenge, as you phrased it. So give us a little bit of context. You're here in Washington almost 100 years to the month after the Treaty of Tartu, your hometown, a treaty that actually ushered in Estonia's independence, that captured for the first time in international law this concept that people have a right to determine their own destiny. You have a lot of champions of Estonia. We've got our Estonian American leaders in the audience. Just give us a little bit of context to be sitting here as president of Estonia today, talking about leading an audacious infrastructure effort, the 3Cs, with a seat on the UN Security Council, membership in NATO and the EU. Give us a little bit of perspective on Estonia's role in helping to shape Western strategy, given where your history has had you in the past.
Two things. We have been catalyzed very often, and you don't need a lot of a catalyzer in the processes. And we are tiny. And that means that we are normally seen as an honest generator of ideas and opportunities, the one who always grabs the opportunities as well, of course. But we are not very threatening. We are 1 million, and also it's fine you mentioned Tartu Peace Treaty, because also, Tartu Peace Treaty ended the war between Red Russia and Estonia. And many countries were at the war. And it was not always very clear with whom you're fighting, because we also had some Russians fighting on our side at that point against the Red Russia and so on. But we were the first ones who decided that the time is now ripe to have a peace agreement. And well, true to the Estonian format, we recognize that Russia, being tired of having all these wars going on, might be open to sign a peace treaty with us. And if they can sign it with us, maybe they can then start resolving the other issues. And indeed, a line of peace treaties follow thereafter. But we are quick to grab an opportunity, but to define it wider than we ourselves. And this is what we are also doing with this initiative. We took the responsibility to shape it into a practical format together with all the Free Seas countries running numerous Sherpa meeting roadshows in the countries in order to be able, myself as well, to go to official visits to other countries and not to waste time and energy on only telling, please come and invest in Estonia, because many moneyed people and their funds are just too big for Estonia. And they say, very nice talking to you, you're a good representative of your country, very interesting to learn, to hear your viewpoint on macroeconomics and all this. I'm sorry, we could buy your country. We're not selling. And I've already tested this now. I've gone out and said, I represent through Freeze initiative, not only my country. I'm inviting you to Tallinn. There will be 100 million people represented by the presidents in the Free Seas initiative. And you have an opportunity to invest in the region, which grows at the speed of 3% and has an important investment cap and all what I just told you. And people listen. That's why we're also doing it, for ourselves and for the region. And we have always been trusting partners and allies to this country. And our trust has always, paid off is a weird thing to say, but you are not ever disappointed us.
I think that's absolutely right. Madam President, let me pick this up on the Three Cs. You talked about the potential because of the differentiated and growth rates and the members of the Three Cs. When we've talked to folks who are sitting in New York and Hong Kong and London, and they're looking at index funds and they're thinking about where capital's flowing, they look at Europe, the European Union, as basically not a big return on investment, slow growth, almost no growth, question mark, recession in some countries. So what is driving this? You're making the case of don't lump us in all as just EU growth rates. What drives a differentiator here, and how do you think that's going to? We've done some studies, and we're actually working with the IMF right now to look at this, that shows that 25% of all growth in Europe will come out of this region. But what's going to drive this, not just the next couple of years, but over the long term, given the volatility we see in the global economy today?
Frankly speaking, and I'm back to European Union, these countries are part of the European Union market. They are very competitive part of the European market for the cost reasons. But this cost advantage is being eroded by the fact that also salaries in the region are rising quite quickly. But nevertheless, if you look, none of them have reached the 100% of the GDP per capita of the EU average country. There are regions in the countries, for example, Tallinn exceeds this and so on. But in general, this cohesion process has been ongoing for 30 years and it's going to continue. Half of the gap roughly has been made up, but the rest of the gap remains. So it's natural cohesion, which always happens if you, join to a bigger, richer market to the countries which are competitive. This is one element which will continue. But part of the reason to have the Free Seas as a common market is that a lot of opportunities for growth and development have not been exploited because these countries lack connections, interconnections, and also the habit to work together among themselves. This potential is totally not unleashed. Estonia is practically part of the Nordic market. It doesn't work right now too much towards the Free Seas countries. Through this initiative, we are creating differentiation of our target markets. And this applies to each and everyone. Some closer to Germany basically have a very important part of their trade and services export going to one or two countries in the Central Europe because they're big. It's been comfortable. But now we need to interconnect and start looking for the region as a whole for new opportunities. And not only, new opportunities in the traditional economic sectors, which is also very important, But we know that the energy market of Europe is changing. It's going to be a lot more smarter. It's going to be a lot more diversified. There will be a lot new technologies development. There will be also a lot of digital development, particularly in the GovTech, where Europe is far ahead of America because European countries are creating a common digital infrastructure for public services, where also in some countries private companies can use the same infrastructure. And I hope there will be more and more of that. All this is driving the restructuring of the economies of this region.
So when we've talked to private sector actors, investors, cross-border infrastructure is sometimes a scary prospect for private investment because it, by definition, involves governments and political involvement. We've seen, you mentioned a $500 billion deficit that needs to be addressed. We've seen maybe $40 billion in EU structural funds. That's been really the game, EU structural funds in this region. The Americans have now talked about it, DFC, $1 billion. But given the scale of underinvestment, $500 billion, how is this different? How is this going to catalyze what we haven't seen yet through infrastructure efforts in the region, really the open invitation to private capital?
There is always discussion that since there is so much EU grant money in the region, is it not outcrowding all private investment? Good thing is it is not, as I said, I mean the investment gap is huge. European Union money has one thing in common for all these countries. It's highly predictable for at least 7, normally 10 and more years in advance which projects will be done. Connecting Europe facility declares long ahead its plans. So you know where this money is, and you are not going to, find yourself in the situation that I wanted to invest and now they crowd me out and my project will be killed. You know far before it happens really that there will be this kind of money. Connecting Europe facility, for example, is financing rail link from Tallinn to Riga, to Vilnius, to Warsaw. But it is not financing any corridors going more down south. We know it. It's not going to change.
Right.
So, Europe is very predictable, which is a good thing. Other thing is, these countries are getting richer. Estonia is losing its well, you wouldn't know it, in Europe everybody knows, Objective 1 status. In short, this means a country is richer than 75% of the EU average GDP per capita. And then you radically lose the financing from the EU cohesion funds. The same which happened to Portugal and Spain when we joined, because then the EU average per capita income went down and they were thrown out. We are now exiting. The other countries are getting close to exiting. So European Union public money is leaving this region for these reasons, which are perfectly good, because countries can stand on their own feet now and private money will have the space. This is important to realize about how Europe is functioning. European Union doesn't want to stay in the developed and more developed markets with public money. Public money is scarce in Europe, I can assure you, like everywhere. We are right now trying to put together the next budget and it's not easy at all. So it flows out as soon as the development is good enough to afford it to do so. It's happening now, so space is there for private money to flow in.
So last week in Riga, the 3 Seas Investment Fund went operational. Our own Ian Brzezinski was out in Riga for that launch. And the week before, 2 weeks before that, Secretary Pompeo came to make the announcement at the Munich Security Conference that the U.S., through the International Development Finance Corporation, would put in $1 billion, but under some conditions that the 3 Seas members have skin in the game, that they put their own funds in, that it comply with what's called the blue dot networks, or high quality infrastructure, and that it be targeted towards energy. So talk about that, first of all. How does it look between now and Tallinn to meeting those conditions, in particular the nations of the region? This is a Central European-led initiative, and yet some have been leading more than others. Where do you think you are in getting all the members to put some funds in, to put some skin in the game?
I think we are seeing now that everybody understands that the train has been built and it's ready to leave the station. And of course, countries who put in money, these countries also can participate in fund board and also, of course, with benefit. Those, who are late and have not joined, at that point, they need to also understand that, I mean, this fund starts operating. So, I mean, projects come in, and I mean, in 50, 100 million chunks, money starts to go out. So if you're late, I'm sorry, the cake has been eaten. And I think this is obvious now that, I mean, countries need to quickly decide whether they want to be the part, whether they are ready to invest, and we know that the governments are discussing this. Some are at the brink of taking the decision like our own, and some are still looking at the ways and opportunities, but definitely everybody is aware that it is a now or never moment. And we want very much this message to fly, that it is a now or never moment. And I mean, people are rational. They know they need this investment. They've been in it for 5 years. Finally, it's getting a concrete format and space. I mean, they want to be there when the fund starts operating, I'm sure.
So the U.S. commitment really put an emphasis, the U.S. administration said we want to put an emphasis on energy resilience, energy independence, energy choices. And you mentioned because this region has been in the middle of some geopolitical seismic activity, we've seen energy used as a weapon. So on the one hand, how do you see this initiative of helping to reduce dependency of the European Union, of this region, to potential political manipulation of energy supplies from Russia? Mm-hmm. And how is this playing with the rest of the European Union, which is a little bit concerned about what this means as Brussels goes head-on into a green agenda? Does the effort to counter Russia's energy game actually give a lease on life to hydrocarbons in this region?
We all know that some of these countries are facing a situation where they cannot go simply green. I mean, Nordic-Baltic region has a lots of plans where it basically almost can do it. But even there, they are still building new pipelines. Mm-hmm. For example, Baltic Connector was only opened a month ago, because we all see that, I mean, gas also works as a reserve. I mean, you can convert your energy, which has been greenly generated, into hydrogen and use it in various ways. And also, I mean, back into the format of natural gas, and from natural gas to hydrogen. So we don't know, none of us knows, where exactly in technologies is this European Union decision that the price of CO2 in 2050 is infinite take us. But all technologies are competing, and what is also our job is to make sure that European Union creates a market and then allows the technologies to compete on it. I'm quite sure that this is what Europe will do, because everybody realizes that if you put too much public emphasis on some technologies, ignoring the other technologies, then you are actually closing the market for some of the potential technologies. This is not going to happen because it doesn't make any economic sense. And European Union is interested in getting this clean energy program done in a way which will be also economically beneficial and achievable. Because if you tell people that tomorrow there will be only wind and solar, and we don't even discuss hydrogen because it has to be made from natural gas, and this is a horrible substance, you are not going to get it done, simply because then it becomes an impossibility. Right now it is a possibility by smart legal space which will be created and letting all technologies to compete.
And do you see the 3Cs initiative as fundamentally helping to mitigate the region's dependency on Russia as a supplier, or at least Russia's ability to manipulate itself its role as a supplier?
Definitely. We, for example, we're very proud, by the way, of Baltic Connector. I mean, it's an EU project, but I mean, it's a project which opened the whole Nordic market for the LNG. How? Nordic markets had no access to the LNG. Baltic Connector connected Finland to Estonia. Estonia is connected to Lithuania, which has a huge LNG terminal with the capacity which nobody needs in the Baltics. Similarly, the Lithuanian-Polish link. I mean, we are already seeing inways of LNG and huge areas opening to the competition. These models need to continue to be developed in between the 3Cs countries, obviously. All countries need to be interconnected, and this is the new energy model anyway for the European Union. because all the new sources also will be relatively flexible, and they wouldn't tell us when they are on and when they are off. So the bigger is your network and your grid, and the more opportunities to save energy and quickly reuse energy you have, the cheaper the whole system is for everybody, and the more of a market it is, because without connections you're not a market. So I see a lot of space, and not only in good old connections, but these connections nowadays have to be smart. If we are talking also of electricity, then I mean production of electricity will be not, I mean, one big producer who has the reserves for, I mean, the peaks. It's getting much more complicated. There is a lots of space to invest also into saving the energy, not using it at a given time when the prices are high, which means there are peaks in consumption. All this is what is called smart connectivity. All, I mean, transport systems, public transport systems, which need to save, to take into account all these green ideas. It's also smart connectivity. So it's all interconnected, and to be interconnected, you need to build interconnectors. It's very simple.
Well, in some respects, this is a bit of a strategic reaction to what folks saw Russia years ago in cutting off gas supplies across Ukraine. But the reality in the region today is that China is emerging as a more significant economic actor and geopolitical actor through its 17+1 format, engaging a broader part of the region that includes 3Cs countries, and what we've seen with major investments in infrastructure projects across the region. So how do you see the presence of the Chinese in the region, and what does the 3Cs initiative do to give you some tools to manage that?
3Cs initiatives gives us capital to manage the lack of capital in the region. And everybody is seeking return on investment. Predatory capital may not be seeking return on investment. So you may ask, how can we compete? But the trick actually here is that the predatory capital is always demanding special conditions, which the 3Cs countries, by the simple fact that they are EU member states, cannot offer anyway. That's, by the way, why the Belt and Road Initiative is not making inroads in the region very much. Yes, there are some ports they can buy and these things. But even, I mean, if you imagine that there is a Chinese-built pipeline in Europe, I mean, neutrality applies. They have to allow each and every supplier into that pipeline. So not interested anymore, for example. I mean, this is how the European free market also works for 3Cs initiative.
And you call this predatory capital. Do you think that is? I mean,
yeah, because I don't want to speak about. I mean, times are. I mean, I think we need to understand that. I mean, this geopolitical kaleidoscope is turning all the time, and we don't know. I think we need to have a general idea about. I mean, when we're talking about China, or when we're talking about capital or telecoms, we need to have rules which apply to each and everybody. And predatory capital is a capital which tries to limit economic growth and reserve itself sectors of economy. This we cannot afford, and this is not going to happen because EU regulation protects the 3Cs countries against it.
So when this whole initiative sort of took place, in fact, when General Jones and Ian Brzezinski with their Polish partners were involved in an initial report on the whole concept, the title of that report was called Completing Europe. And it was really about this concept, a bigger concept of completing Europe. And today, as this has taken momentum, we've heard a lot out of the Western Balkans, a lot out of Ukraine, Moldova, about how they understand where the politics are on EU enlargement. That's not happening tomorrow by any means. But they still have clarity of a sense of aspiration of wanting to be part of this picture, part of this infrastructure. How do you see the 3Cs initiative as an opportunity to weave them into what's happening, if you think geographically north-south in the region, laying the predicate, perhaps, that we build the infrastructure of Europe long before the politics allow for the enlargement of Europe?
Yes, first of all, in the 3Cs fund, the regulation says that you can go cross-border to a country which is not a member of the initiative even. So basically, even if we do nothing and change nothing in the current setup, I mean, if you are on the way for a pipeline or a cable to be built, you can benefit from it. This mostly applies, for example, for Ukraine, because if you look at the map, it's simply there. Ukraine also has a free trade agreement. Then there are countries who aspire to become EU members, which helps the situation because, I mean, if you want to involve them, they apply similar standards because you cannot have an FTA with Europe without applying the similar standards. So they are not so difficult to work with also cross-border. In addition, of course, these countries are probably fitting the concept of lack of investment even more than the free seas countries. Mm-hmm. And there is an additional element that since they are outside of the EU country and not all EU regulation applies, the predatory capital probably, I mean, is a bigger risk there. So we have all the reason to invite these countries to be close to this initiative and involve them in our investment projects. I'm quite sure that since Ukrainians have been very interested, we will invite them to Tallinn. It's not a treaty-based thing, this Free Seas initiative. It's an initiative, so we are pretty flexible about it. We can invite, we can see, I mean, how we can make space if all Free Seas countries agree. There are Free Seas countries, there are partner countries, US and Germany, hopefully, and we can discuss among ourselves pretty freely. And if we feel all this will benefit, and I'm quite sure that it will benefit, because again, look at the map.
So let me broaden this a bit. I want to ask a bigger question about the future of Europe, and then I want to invite our colleagues to catch my attention and come in with some questions, and we can expand well beyond 3 Cs to anything out there on the agenda. But Europe's in a bit of strategic uncertainty or ambiguity at the moment, if you will. We've heard really contrasting visions coming out of different capitals across Europe. There's a reflection process underway. We've seen the EU go through extraordinary strain with the migration crisis, which now might be brewing again as we see developments on the Greek-Turkish border. We see the power of the EU and Schengen really being challenged by the fundamentals of what a coronavirus means for the four freedoms, particularly freedom of movement. As a leader now, as a president of a member of the state of the European Union, do you think there is a prospect of a convergence on a strategic direction of how the European Union sees its role in the world, its partnership with the United States, its place in an era of renewed geopolitical competition?
European Union definitely has ambition to be a player also behind its own borders. I mean, of course, including the Eastern Partnership and the neighborhood, but also to be a player in Middle East, in Libya, elsewhere. For that, it has realized that it doesn't only need economic capacity, but it also needs to develop its capabilities, its military capabilities, and more countries are coming up to the 2%, and also realizing that we need to spend on our defense and on NATO quite a lot. I mean, NATO membership, EU membership does not exactly coincide, but the overlaps are big enough to declare that European Union, I mean, relies as a whole on NATO for deterrence, defense, and if necessary, also projecting our views and power outside of the European Union. That said, I can tell you that, I mean, I started working in European Union institution 2004, having been part of the negotiating team of Estonia during Mart Laar's government, 1999 to 2002. And when I joined, then immediately, I mean, then quite soon the financial crisis came and everything. And many people in Estonia started to have a feeling that we came late to the party. I mean, it's so horrible. These discussions are so harsh, so hard. Maybe it disintegrates. I mean, shock and horror. And I was doing a radio program once a week on Euro matters, I mean, in Estonia. And then I started to dig into history. And I found, what did I find? Of course, I found the crisis of the empty chair. I mean, the rebate system, its installation. So what I realized was that even if for the outsiders, Europe looks like a bundle of different interests, people's, I mean, egos, politicians, which is kind of, I mean, fighting between each other, yelling and constantly rolling into the future without taking that much notice of what is going on outside. This is actually not true. Europe is a great ability to separate different differences of opinion into different streams of development, working through them one by one, coming to conclusions and then more or less implementing it. And I started to think, why is this always happening? And why is this finally this centrifugal powers never win and centripetal powers always do? And this is for the simple fact that there is no alternative. Because otherwise, how would we resolve our things in Europe? We wouldn't have Brussels, the big egg, where the council meetings gather sector by sector, different ministers at different times to keep different issues separated. We wouldn't have commission and council officials to prepare for it. We wouldn't have parliament to involve wider public. And when decisions would somehow be taken, we wouldn't have nobody to follow the implementation. It would look like COP process, where you argue for 5 years where is the meeting, then you decide what is on the agenda, what are the rules of decision making, and when all this is done and dusted and presidents have left, then nobody implements the thing. So European Union simply makes sense because it gives a structure to this debate. It makes it transparent in addition to citizens, which is also a useful thing, and it always muddles through. Muddling through is not in treaty, common sense is not in treaty, but it happens always.
That's one of the most cogent explanations of the value of the European Union for an American audience. I welcome that. I want to open it up for some comments and questions. Let me take a couple. I'll start with this woman here. Please introduce yourself and ask a question, and please be brief so we can take a couple, and then I'll come to this gentleman here.
Hi, my name is Angel, and I'm with Hong Kong Phoenix Television. Actually, it's a question follow-up with yours. Is that I just checked that Estonia has diagnosed the second coronavirus cases. What actions are you taking in the country to protect your citizens? And do you see there might be more sort of travel restrictions in the future inside the European Union? Thank you very much.
And we'll take your question as well, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I admire your enthusiasm and your efforts to the 3 Cs initiative. There was a time when I was Minister of Foreign Affairs of Croatia and very much supportive to the idea. I am fully aware of the work of General Joseph, Jan Brzezinski and others, and I'm a true believer in the success of a 3 Cs initiative. But I do see some problems, and because of those problems, I also tend to think that the Tallinn summit can be crucial. If those problems are not resolved, I'm afraid that we will continue with the stories. And it's not just about investment. There are 4 issues which are more in the category of political
Just briefly,
issues.
please.
Let me just list those 4 issues that I see and ask the Madam President.
As long as it's brief, sir.
Yes. So the number 1, it is the branding issue, because in many of European countries it's branded as the initiative either Washington or Brussels. It's artificial dilemma, but that is branded that way. Number 2 is real position of Brussels. We do know the position of the previous Commission and commitment of the President Juncker. What is with the new Commission? Or is there double games in Brussels? Number 3, Russia is playing by different rules. So you have the fact that Russia is influencing those 12 plus 1 country through the energy, but also through the money. I could give you a concrete example, but you are aware. And number 4, maybe the biggest problem, is China, who is playing by totally different rules. One set of the rules back home and different set of rules. So basically, China is using European money, playing by European rules and participating in the tenders that they are winning easily. No American, no European company can win by European rules. Why? Because they are subsidized and they come with significantly less. So unless that is resolved, how do you see that can be progress?
Thank you, Mr. Minister. You'll take those 2, please.
Coronavirus is something which I believe, and I have a degree in natural sciences, but I don't declare I'm an expert. But immediately when it broke out and started to come to Europe, I checked. First of all, our children are safe. This was very important. And I said this immediately to our people when our press came to ask me, what should we be most worried? Elderly people, otherwise weak. To make sure that other people will not put these people at risk, we need to call for our people to be careful and compassionate. If you think, nowadays probably simply because I traveled, don't visit your elderly relations, call them instead. And all these warnings are out there. If you have been in contact, if you come back to the country, you feel sick, don't go to a family doctor. Call emergency services. They will take care of you so that you will not go and contaminate the area where people who are very sensitive, sick people with other diseases come. This is what we tell our citizens, and we hope this will end without further restrictions to travel. Self-restriction, but I was to the region, I'm not now traveling around in Estonia or taking another travel before I'm sure I'm safe. This is being advised to the people. People are allowed to keep their children away from school, which is totally unfair for those people who didn't get to ski in northern Italy during the school holidays, which just ended, because those kids have to go to school, but these ones now might be getting 2 additional weeks of holiday. Unfair, but I think it's necessary. This way we are, keeping the panic away from our people. And right now I see it's really working. If other governments work a similar way, I'm quite sure we can handle this. And I'm afraid we need to learn to live with this virus, because maybe it will ebb in the spring, we'll be back in the autumn. World is like it is, and I'm sure that vaccines will emerge, but this virus could be as changing as flu, which means that you need a new vaccine each and every year. It's expensive, but I'm quite sure we'll come to grips with this disease as we have come with the others. Was lengthy, I'm sorry. Branding issue for free seas. I can see, and I've tested it, as I said already myself, that it does bring benefits. It's more so for the smaller, I admit. If you invite people to invest in Poland, this is big as well. But on the other hand, for 30 years we have been inviting FDI to our countries, and it's been coming. The free niche is in cross-border. And cross-border, we have demonstrated through Connecting Europe facility that, we can do in Europe. So now, as this public money is leaving empty space, private money can come in. How successful the branding is, it depends on the presidents very much, because it's our format, we are responsible. But if we all talk about it and point out that there are people who believe in it, put money in it, then I'm quite sure that the branding will work as well. Brussels, yes, President Juncker's position was known. Also, President von der Leyen's position is known. And we've invited her to come. The Transport Commissioner has confirmed. The Energy Commissioner, I hope, will come as well. She's Estonian. And basically, we know that the Commission wants this region to develop. The Commission has also realized that this initiative is branded and run and technically resolved in a way which European Union has absolutely no reason to feel suspicious or worried about. If we can make, and I deeply hope we can make Ukraine and the Balkans come also closer to the initiative, it actually resolves a problem for Brussels that these countries very much want to be close to the European Union, but they have few visible, useful initiatives to help them do so. This might develop into one. Russia and China. Yes, Russian and Chinese money is always there. If member states apply properly EU competition and procurement rules, it's just capital. And that is why if you apply them properly, they normally, I'm sorry to say, do not compete that much. But we are building also huge railway projects, so we never said them you cannot come, but you do not get any special conditions. And if you don't get any special conditions, then you are just capital. On these conditions, they are not so much interested at all.
Terrific. I'm getting the word that we might have to, I think there was a question right here, and is that not right? All right, then we'll yes, I thought you had raised your hand. This woman right here, please. I thought you raised your hand earlier on. Please introduce yourself.
Valeria Edison, Voice of America, Russian Language Service. I just wanted to follow up on which other project you would prioritize in the 3 Seas initiative to reduce the economic dependence on Russia. You mentioned the Baltic Connector, but are there other projects that you would like to emphasize? Thank you.
And Madam President, I've gotten the sign from your team that I should bring it to a wrap, so I'll let you sort of pull this together as a conclusion as you'd like, and I apologize to those who I didn't get. Apologies.
Baltic Connector is an example how you diversify by creation of the market, not ruining the market by public money. But it's nothing doing with 3 Seas. We have prioritized smart connectivity, energy, infrastructure, and digital. And that's where our political prioritization ends. The fund is run on the principle of competition between the projects. If the fund manager, which is Amber Capital Management, believes this project will deliver for investors, it will be financed. I may cry over a project which did not get financing from 3 Seas initiatives in Estonia. I can do nothing about it.
Terrific. Madam President, thank you so much for your leadership on this whole initiative, for your leadership of Estonia as a remarkable ally of the United States, and we wish you the best of luck on the pathway to Tallinn and look forward to being there with you at the Business Forum.
Come in big numbers, please. You're all invited.
Please join me in thanking the President. Thank you.